Genesis chapter 2, verses 4 through 7, the creation of man and woman. This is the account of the heavens and the earth when they were created in the day that the Lord made earth and heaven. Now no shrub of the field was yet on earth, and no plant of the field had yet sprouted, for the Lord had not sent rain upon the earth, and there was no man to cultivate the ground. But a mist used to rise from the earth and water the whole surface of the ground. Then the Lord God formed the man of the dust from the ground and breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, and the man became a living person. Some Old Testament scholars have claimed that this section of Genesis 2 is a second account of creation written by a different author whose message conflicts with what's found in chapter 1. That theory is not widely promoted today, because in these verses, Moses tells the same creation story, but adds details that we need to know in order to understand events that happen later. Genesis chapter 2, verse 4 is the first of 11 account or statements that mark the progress of the story Moses wrote in the book of Genesis. Looking back to the third day, Moses told how God had brought forth vegetation to provided a mist to water the plants. You won't encounter rain in Genesis until the time of the flood, which we'll talk about in a couple weeks. It's interesting that God wanted someone to till the earth and help produce the food needed. Humans are stewards of God's creation blessings and should use his gifts as he commands. God and man work together. God put Adam into the garden to do the work God designed for him in cultivating the soil and caring for it. Genesis chapter 2, verses 8 through 17. The Lord God planted a garden toward the east in Eden, and there he placed the man whom he had formed. Out of the ground the Lord God caused every tree to grow that is pleasing to the sight and good for food. The tree of life was also in the midst of the garden, and the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Now a river flowed out of Eden to water the garden, and from there it divided and became 4 rivers. The name of the first is Pishon. It flows around the whole land of Havilah, where there is gold. The gold of that land is good. The bdellium and the onyx stone are there as well. The name of the second river is Gihon. It flows around the whole land of Cush. The name of the third river is Tigris. It flows east of Assyria. And the fourth river is the Euphrates. Then the Lord God took the man and put him in the Garden of Eden to cultivate it and tend it. The Lord God commanded the man, saying, "From any tree of the garden you may freely eat, but from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil you shall not eat, for on the day that you eat from it you will certainly die." Eden means either delight or place of much water, and suggests that this garden was a paradise from the hand of God. We have no information about the Pishon River or the Gihon River, and though the Tigris and Euphrates are familiar to us, we still don't have enough data to determine the exact location of the Garden of Eden. The location of the land of Havilah is also uncertain. Some place it in Armenia, others in Mesopotamia. Fortunately, it isn't necessary to master ancient geography in order to understand the spiritual lessons of these early chapters in Genesis. In this beautiful garden, God provided both bounty and beauty. Adam and Eve had food to eat and God's lovely handiwork to enjoy. As yet, sin hadn't entered the garden, so their happiness wasn't marred. Everything was excellent, valuable, and happy. It was very good. A covenant is a binding arrangement between 2 or more parties that governs their relationship. The word command is introduced at this point because it is God who makes the terms of the agreement. God is the creator and man is the creature, a royal tenant in God's wonderful world. So God has the right to tell the man what he can and cannot do. God didn't ask for Adam's advice. He simply gave him his commandment. In fact, nowhere in the Bible will you ever find God asking for any person's advice or opinion on what God decides or does. He doesn't need it. God had given great honor and privilege to Adam in making him his vice-regent on earth. But with privilege also comes responsibility. God expresses his love and will to Adam and Eve and their descendants. Obedience to this word would keep them in the sphere of God's fellowship and approval. It would keep them in relationship with God. Notice, no other created being is offered relationship with God, their Creator. All God's commands are good commands and bring good things to those who obey them. God placed two special trees in the middle of the garden, the tree of life and the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Eating from the tree of life would bring immortality. Eating from the second tree would bring an experiential knowledge of good and evil, but it would also bring death. Since they had never experienced evil, Adam and Eve were like innocent children. When they disobeyed God, they became like him in being able to discriminate between good and evil, but they became unlike him in that they lost their sinlessness and eventually died. Genesis chapter 2, verses 18 and 19. Then the Lord God said, "It is not good for the man to be alone. I will make him a helper suitable for him." And out of the ground the Lord God formed every animal of the field and every bird of the sky, and brought them to the man to see what he would call them. And whatever the man called a living creature, that was its name. God gave Adam the task as vice-regent. Adam was to name all the animals. Now, before you think that's impossible, remember this is by kinds. This would be similar to our scientific classification of family, not of species. For example, Adam did not have to name every species of dog, he just named the wolf or the dog kind. Biblical scientists estimate that there were probably about 1,400 kinds, and it probably took Adam between 6 and 8 hours to name them all. God brought them to him, and he did the job God asked of him to do. At the close of the 6th day of creation, God had surveyed everything he had made and pronounced it very good. But now, God says there's something in his wonderful world that is not good. The man is alone. In fact, the Hebrew text, the phrase "not good," is at the beginning of the Lord's statement in chapter 2, verse 18. The words in Hebrew mean good, appropriate, or agreeable. What was not good, appropriate, or agreeable about man's solitude? After all, Adam could fellowship with God. He could enjoy the beauty of the garden and eat of its fruits. He could accomplish his daily work, and he could even play with the animals. What more could he want? Well, let's see.